He was the man who could buy everything, except peace. She was the girl who had nothing, except hope. And on a rainy night, fate made her sit at the wrong table. And the coldest man in the city felt something he thought he'd lost forever: a heartbeat. What started as a mistake would soon become the most beautiful accident of their lives. The rain fell like shattered glass over the city, painting the streets in silver. Inside the most luxurious restaurant in downtown, every table was dressed in crystal and candlelight, filled with laughter and murmurs of wealthy couples. Every table except one. Near the window sat Ethan Carter, the city's youngest billionaire CEO, a man everyone feared to speak to unless necessary. His expression was stone, his gaze cold enough to make anyone freeze. He was there for a blind date, one his mother insisted on arranging, but he didn't believe in love. Not anymore. Not since the woman he'd loved years ago had walked out of his life without explanation, leaving behind only a note that said, "You deserve someone better." Since that night, Ethan had stopped trying to find warmth in people. He glanced at his watch for the third time. 30 minutes late. The waiter hovered nervously nearby, but Ethan didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His silence was enough to make the man tremble. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky, and a figure ran through the rain, clutching a paper bag to her chest. Her name was Lila Bennett, a struggling young woman who worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over her head. She was exhausted, soaked, and starving, but she had one last delivery to make before her shift ended. When she stepped inside the restaurant, her shoes squeaked embarrassingly against the marble floor. Heads turned. The hostess looked her up and down, clearly judging the cheap jacket clinging to her shoulders. Lila ignored it, scanning the room for the customer who'd ordered the takeout. All she saw was one table empty except for a man sitting alone, glancing at his watch impatiently. That must be him, she thought. Her heart raced. Maybe he was starving and angry. She hurried toward him, gripping the paper bag tightly. Excuse me, sir," she said nervously, standing beside his table. "Are you the one who ordered?" He looked up, his icy eyes piercing into hers. "You're late," he said sharply. Lila blinked, startled. I'm sorry. The rain—" "Sit down," he interrupted. His tone left no room for argument. Without understanding why, she obeyed. She sat across from him, confused, feeling completely out of place in the elegant room. The waiter arrived instantly, as if waiting for Ethan's signal, and poured 2 glasses of wine. Ethan studied her silently. Her clothes were simple, her hair damp, but there was something in her eyes, honesty, something pure he hadn't seen in years. "So," he said finally, "why do you want to date me?" Lila's mouth fell open. "Date you?" He frowned. "Isn't that what this is? My mother said you were unconventional." Her eyes widened as realization hit. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You think I'm your date?" No, I'm just a delivery girl. I came to drop off this food." For a moment, Ethan said nothing. Then, to her shock, a quiet laugh escaped his lips. Not cruel, but amused, almost disbelieving. "You came to deliver food?" he asked. She nodded miserably, and I sat at the wrong table. Instead of dismissing her, he gestured to the chair. "Then stay," he said softly. "You're already here." Lila stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Very." And so, for reasons she couldn't explain, she stayed. What began as an awkward silence slowly turned into a conversation that neither of them expected. Ethan asked her about her work, and she told him, about cleaning offices at night, about her dream to one day open a cafe where no one would ever feel unwanted. He listened fascinated. No one ever spoke to him like this. No rehearsed charm, no flattery, just truth. When she laughed, it was soft and genuine, and it warmed something inside him that had been frozen for years. When she talked about her late mother and how she missed her smile every morning, he looked down, realizing how long it had been since he'd missed anyone. Hours passed without them noticing. The storm outside faded into a quiet drizzle. Lila realized it was almost midnight and stood up in panic. "Oh no, my boss is going to fire me. I was supposed to be back an hour ago." Ethan stood too, reaching for his wallet. "At least let me pay you for your time." She shook her head quickly. "You already gave me dinner, sir." That's more than enough. He stared at her, confused. People never said no to his money, yet she walked away, smiling, her shoes squeaking once again across the floor. As the door closed behind her, Ethan looked at the empty chair across from him. For the first time in years, he smiled, not a cold, polite smile, but something real. He didn't even know her name, but somehow, that didn't matter, because for the first time in a long time, the cold CEO didn't feel cold anymore. He didn't know it yet, but the girl who sat at his table by mistake had just changed his life forever. He didn't know her name. She didn't know who he really was, but fate wasn't done with them yet, because the next morning, when Ethan Carter walked into his company's lobby, the same girl from last night was standing there, holding a mop. Ethan arrived at Carter Enterprises as usual, surrounded by bodyguards, assistants, and an air of quiet power that made everyone lower their gaze. The building reflected his personality, tall, intimidating, and spotless. But that morning, he wasn't thinking about meetings or numbers. He was thinking about her, the drenched delivery girl who had smiled at him without asking for anything in return. He didn't know why she lingered in his thoughts. Maybe it was her laughter. Maybe it was her courage to look him in the eye when everyone else avoided it. When he stepped out of the elevator, something made him stop. Across the lobby, a young woman in a faded uniform was scrubbing the marble floor. Her hair was pulled up messily, strands falling around her tired face. And then she looked up. Their eyes met. Time froze. "You?" she whispered, her voice trembling as the mop slipped from her hands. The bucket tipped over, spilling soapy water across the floor. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "You work here?" "I just started last week," she stammered. "Please don't tell anyone about last night." "I swear I didn't mean to." He cut her off gently, his tone softer than she remembered. "You were the only real person I've met in a very long time, Lila." She blinked in shock. "You remembered my name?" "I asked the waiter," he said simply. "You left before I could." Lila didn't know what to say. She wanted to disappear, but he kept looking at her, not with judgment, but something else. Something almost warm. From that moment, everything began to change. Ethan started coming down to the lower floors more often, making random inspections that his staff couldn't understand. The employees whispered that the CEO had gone strange. He never cared about janitors before. But the truth was, he wanted to see her. He'd find excuses to pass by her cleaning station, to ask questions that had nothing to do with business. "How's your cafe dream coming along?" he'd say with a faint smile, pretending it was casual. She'd laugh nervously. "Still just a dream, sir. Dreams are free, right?" "Not all of them," he'd answer, his voice low, and she'd blush, turning away to hide her smile. Day after day, the invisible girl who cleaned floors became the reason the coldest man in the city began arriving to work early, just to catch a glimpse of her. For the first time in years, he stopped feeling alone, but not everyone was happy. His assistant Claire noticed the changes. "Sir," she said one morning, closing the office door behind her, "people are talking. They think you're involved with one of the cleaning staff." Ethan didn't even look up from his paperwork. Let them talk. "Sir, your reputation." He raised his eyes, calm but firm. "I don't live for their approval, Claire." The rumors grew anyway. And soon, the management decided to fix the problem on their own. A week later, Lila was called into HR. The woman behind the desk smiled coldly. "I'm sorry, Lila, we're downsizing. Your position is being removed." Lila froze. "But I just started." "Budget cuts," the woman interrupted. "You'll receive your last payment by the end of the day." She left the building in silence, clutching her small bag, eyes glistening. She didn't cry until she reached the street. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was being punished for simply existing near someone too powerful. A black car stopped beside her. The window rolled down. Ethan was inside. "Get in," he said quietly. She hesitated, wiping her tears. "Please don't pity me." "I don't," he said. "Just get in." Something in his voice made her obey. The car drove through quiet streets until it stopped in front of a small, empty cafe with a "for sale" sign on the door. Ethan stepped out first and handed her the key. "It's yours," he said simply. Lila stared at him, confused. "Mine? Ethan, what?" "You once told me you wanted a place where no one would feel unwelcome. I bought it this morning." Her voice trembled. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not charity," he said, meeting her eyes. "It's a promise. You reminded me what it feels like to be human. Let me help you live your dream." Tears filled her eyes, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. "I don't know how to thank you. Just make this place warm," he said softly. "So even people like me can feel welcome sometimes." Months later, the cafe became the heart of the neighborhood. Lila named it the Second Chance. People came not just for coffee, but for kindness, for the warmth she gave to everyone who walked through the door. And sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the city lights shimmered outside, Ethan would come in quietly, without bodyguards, without a title, just a man looking for peace. She'd hand him his favorite cup and he'd smile, knowing he'd found something no money could ever buy. Because sometimes, the smallest mistake, sitting at the wrong table, can lead you exactly where your heart was always meant to go.